be more interactive. I wish that we would have been able to personally meet, because a couple of years ago I had visited LD Engineering for a similar program, and it's much easier when we are face to face and talking about the topic than in online format, because I cannot see how talk to me anytime that you would like. There is, as you know, there is a hands button on raise hand button here. And so you can actually, yeah, I can see Mr. Varia was demonstrating you the hand button. So you can raise that button, click on that, and one of the organizers, because I'm in full screen mode, I may not be able to see the hand. So one of the organizers, I'll request you to help me say that this person has a question. So feel free to raise it. Feel free to raise as many hands as possible. Don't worry about asking the questions again and again, because this is my role. My role is to share the learning that we have gained as part of the research center. Okay, so please help me make it more interactive so that we can both gain from it, and it will be a both side learning and not just me sharing one side information. So let me start with a basic information of what is a net zero energy building. So a net zero energy building, does anyone has anyone heard of a net zero energy building before? Probably. But what I would say is there are different ways to define a net zero energy building. What is the most basic standard definition of a net zero building? Energy building is that an annual energy consumption of your building is less than or equivalent to what you are generating on site. So if you are having a house, then you are probably consuming 4,000, 5,000 kilowatt hours in a year of energy. Uh, you would actually be generating more than that in your home throughout the year, so that overall your building becomes a net zero. Now there is a difference between a net zero and a zero energy building. So a zero energy building is where you are off the grid. When you are off the grid, you don't need connection from the utility companies like Torrent at all, or GEB at all. You can actually say that my generation all the time for every second is more than my consumption, so I don't need any more outside energy. So that's a zero energy building. But what I'm talking about is a net zero energy building, where you don't have to be zero throughout. There are times of the year, like in summer, where you can actually draw electricity. Okay.
Participants are requested to keep themselves mute.
So in a net zero energy building, you can actually consume more in certain parts of time of the year. For example, in summer, when you need a lot more energy, you will be consuming more energy than what you are generating. And then in winter, when you don't need as much air conditioning system, you can actually generate more and balance out what you are consuming. So that's a definition of net zero energy building. Why it's important for us to look at net zero energy buildings? Let me give you a context. So in India right now, the energy consumption for space cooling is 135 terawatt hours in 2017. But all of you must be seeing that how quickly we are adding air conditioning systems in all parts of our buildings, from offices, home, and it's becoming a very common business as usual. And because of that, it's going to go up to 600, almost 4 times what the current consumption is, or 5 times by 2038, 2037. Our current cooling consumption per capita right now is still the lowest compared to what the global average. What that shows is that if you start behaving like what people are behaving in the other parts of world, for example, the United States or other countries, then we will be actually spending using energy consumption 4 more times than we are right now consuming. So we are already conservative, but still with that conservative approach also, the expansion in the number of people who are getting AC is so exponential that we will really see a huge jump in energy consumption. That is also another reason why this domain is really, really interesting for all of you as a faculty to get into, learn and get involved and do some work, research, and guide your students in this domain. The other part you are seeing is that the emissions, which is a huge challenge right now, right now there is 8% of the emissions that is being generated in 2016 is by space cooling system. So all our AC systems who were consuming energy, they are contributing to 8% of the total emissions. But by 2050, that 8% will become 30%. So again, these are the three reasons why it's very, very important for us in India in particular, where we need to look at net zero energy building solutions or high energy efficiency building as a part of the solution. So a couple of slides on where I work and why I'm going to talk a little bit about CHEPT University is the university is focused mainly on the habitats, on understanding and designing, but all different parts of university is focusing on building habitats. So how to build buildings, your campus and cities and urban planning. So all that is what our university mainly focuses on. A research center where I'm working looks at different aspects of material characterization, comfort, different kinds of cooling systems, simulations, and controls. Um, so this is why I am here talking about the net zero energy building, which is part of our research facility. So you might all be familiar if you have visited LD University, LD Engineering before that. In front of the same engineering college, there is a CEPT campus, which is close to Hussain and Doshi Gufa. That's where CEPT University is located. And this is where this net zero energy building is built. Why I'm talking about the location, let me explain a little bit more. So how would one go about designing a net zero energy building? So net zero energy building does not happen by our natural course of the way we design the building. We need to think slightly differently. We need to spend more time in designing the building than actually building a building. What happens right now is many times you might have seen in your homes is when you start using your uh, uh, constructing your own homes, many of the decisions are made on site. For example, you're saying, okay, where should the plumbing line go? Where should the electrical wirings go? And the electricians on site decides based on his skills, what's the best place to put the units, what's the AC person comes and puts, where should I put my outdoor unit and indoor unit, and how does it affect the efficiency? But to achieve high efficiency, we actually need to think about two things in the design stage. We need to spend more time on pre-design. So when you say pre-design, what do we have to look at? The climate analysis. So we need to see where we are building. If you are building a building in Ahmedabad, then it will be different than what you are going to build it in Chennai or in Delhi or in London or in San Francisco, because the climate is different. You don't need to have the same building design that we have right now everywhere. So we need to first understand what is the climate. When I say climate, it's very simple. It's no rocket science. We all know that what is the temperature that we observed in Ahmedabad, what is the humidity range that we observe in Ahmedabad, and what is the solar radiation that we get, what is the wind velocity, what is direction of wind that we are getting in Ahmedabad, so that you can kind of understand and use it in your design, saying that if I have two windows placed in certain ways, I will get good natural ventilation in my design. Once you do that, you will look at the technical analysis, saying that, okay, now if I start using 1-star AC with the 5-star AC, how much benefit I am going to get in my energy saving. So that gives you a technical potential analysis, saying that potential, this is the extreme to which I can achieve my design, take to my design. Then you start, once you identify saying, okay, this is my place, this is my target, then you start doing a conceptual design of your building. So what is a conceptual design? So I'm taking an example of, of a home where you say, okay, I need 2-bedroom house or a 3-bedroom house, and I need 1-floor or 2-floor building. So that's where you start specifying the requirements and the design. That's saying I need minimum this area of my bedroom. And in that stage is when you start using certain aspects such as passive features. What is a passive feature? I mean, it's a very simple, again, I say it's a very common sense approach. The way I'm going to explain you this design is that where will I put my window? Should I put it in the north direction or should I put it in the south direction? Should I keep my shading devices or should I not keep my shading devices? Where should I put my window location so that I get maximum wind in my home, so that I can actually open the window and feel comfortable? What should be the thickness of my wall? And what is the kind of air conditioning systems do I need? Do I just need 2 ACs in or 1 AC in my bedroom and everything else is naturally ventilated? Or I'm going to keep 1 AC and one air cooler in my home. So this is where you start, doing the conceptual design of the building. Then you start going deeper in terms of actually the development of the system. So you start looking at the sections of what should be my sections of my opening. What should be the uh, window area? I need 4 windows in my living room or 3 windows because I want daylight. What should be the area of my window? How much daylight I can use? What should be my actual system capacity? Should I get 1.5 ton system or a 2-ton system or a 3-ton system? That's when you start actually getting into a system design. And finally, in the last step, you do a system optimization. This is where you start optimizing the performance of your system, saying, okay, I can increase my change my direction of window and reduce my capacity of AC from 2 tons to 1.5 tons. That's where you start doing the optimization, the balancing of the two. So essentially there are 4 steps: pre-design, conceptual design, system development, and then finally, once everything is finalized, you will do system optimization. Um, what happened in this net zero energy building is we actually conducted 3 in-person sharings. So we called all contractors who will be working on the project, all consultants, and say, let's sit together and try to see what we can do to achieve a net zero energy building. And that helped a lot, because then, different ideas will come up and then one person says, nope, as per our experience, this system does not work. This AC does not work, or this window does not work. So in-person meetings were conducted. Of course, this was pre-COVID. And over 50 virtual meetings. So we spent tremendous amount of times on the virtual meetings to talk about the, everybody giving their own design and then other people scrutinizing it. So this design process, in my opinion, is one of the most important facet to, if you want to build a net zero energy building, a thought process that goes in designing the net zero energy building. Now, moving on, I'll walk you through some of the strategies that we have used in our building. And I think that is also applicable in all buildings. That's called, the first strategy we have used is called a building massing exercise. Now, when I say massing exercise, that talks about the thermal mass of a building. Now, what is a thermal mass? So if I put it very simplistically, if I'm sure all of you have visited temples, the old temples that is there throughout India, and you might have observed that when we walk inside this temple, suddenly you feel that the inside temperature is cooler than what we experience in our homes. So what is the reason for that? That is, the reason is that the thickness of these walls are so high. They are very thick walls that they store the energy. So the outside effect of outside temperature really slowly penetrates inside the building. So you actually have a very, very thick wall, and inside temperature almost stays very, very constant. And that's what we observe in our temples, because they use the very thick material, and also a material with a very, very high capacity properties to absorb or to store heat. But in the current scenario, that's very challenging, because thicker the wall is, more expensive it is, right? You need more material, and so it's also consuming a lot of inherent energy in the building of these material. So we need to balance that. What should be the thickness of your wall, so that we get good uh, good resistance to the outside temperature. So the outside temperature modulation is less inside compared to outside, or much less. But at the same time, it should not be very expensive, or it should be feasible and practical in the real world. But one other aspect after deciding the thickness is actually design of your building. So you can see on the left side here, there are 4 design options: option 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the only difference in these 4 options is where do you place this wall. And according to that, you actually affect how much loads get generated inside the building. So in the morning, for example, in east you will get a lot of sun, so certain heat gets stored on the wall. And in the afternoon, the south is where you get a lot of solar radiation, because the sun is on the southern direction in our hemisphere. So we actually can decide what is the shape of the building. That also affects the cooling needs of the building. So before even talking about the systems, we need to first try to minimize the cooling needs of our building. So you can see these 4 options we have evaluated for our building, and said, by having a different option, what should be the cooling load in our building. And you can see that option 2 came out to have the 10 to 15% load than option 4, which was the highest compared to everything else. So that's why we went with option 2 in our building design. And what was the difference between option 2 and 4, as you can see, is that there is a space here given that reduces the direct solar radiation falling on the surfaces, affecting the building load options for the building. Right? So that's why these designs and these angles are sometimes placed in the building design. So you get reduced heat load in our building. So that is a one strategy: building massing and the orientation, which you can use to design your building. What is the next strategy that you can consider? Is shading, right? So this is where the passive design approach comes. Now, before going into the shading part, let me talk a little bit about comfort. So we design buildings not to maintain a constant temperature, but to keep people comfortable. That's the aim of our study, right? And what are the factors that affect the comfort? Temperature, relative humidity, air velocity. As might you know that the warmer the temperature, less comfortable we are. The higher the relative humidity, when it's when you go in a city like Mumbai, you feel like really humid. And if you turn on your fan when it's hot outside, we actually also feel quite comfortable. So higher air velocity increases heat loss from our body, and because of that we start having a perspiration heat loss, and that's how we start feeling comfortable. So what happens in the physiology of your body when we are saying I'm comfortable or I'm not comfortable? Of course, there are psychological aspects, there are adaptation aspects, but physiologically, our body is producing certain heat inside our building, and it has to reject this heat to feel comfortable. So if your core body temperature is 36, 37 degrees, you are actually sitting in a 23 degrees, 24 degrees, you are able to more easily lose heat because of the temperature difference between your skin, your core, and your surrounding temperature. The higher the temperature, the harder your body has to work to lose that heat and make people feel comfortable. So that's why you need to think about what factors affect the comfort: temperature, relative humidity, and air velocity. There is also a radiant temperature, that means what is surface producing. So if you are next to the window, you will feel warmer or cooler depending upon what the conditions are outside. So there is also surfaces that affect it. But these are the four parameters that primarily affect comfort. Now, when we do a comfort study, what we have found out is that it's not really a constant temperature what people want. People feel that they can accept a slightly warmer temperature if outside is really, really warm. So we don't have to maintain a constant 23, 24 degrees. We can actually go a little warmer. What we have also found is that in cities like India, where cities of India, people actually prefer a slightly warmer temperature. If we keep a colder temperature, they are actually freezing and they are trying to wear more clothes or just trying to suffer from the cold environment. But many people prefer that we keep a slightly warmer temperature, 26, 27, 28, and they feel very comfortable in that temperature as long as there is some air movement allowing heat loss through your body. So you need to look for what is a comfort in your space. Now, what is affected in the comfort is what is the activity that you are going to do inside the building. So if you are building a gym, then your activity will be high, right? And then you have to lose more heat and you need to maintain certain conditions like that. Or if you are in a COVID zone where your doctors are going to wear PPE kits, then they actually need to maintain a very, very low temperature so that they can actually survive and lose heat from the body. But if you are in an office space or in colleges like you are, then we are actually going to be primarily either teaching or sitting and doing some work. So the activity level will be reasonable. And in that case, you can see here that the top left graph shows that the the comfort band, which is shown in yellow, is where 90% of the people feel comfortable. And it varies and goes as high as 29, 30 degrees during summertime, where people can still feel comfortable in this environment. So if we utilize this strategy, so instead of designing our air conditioning system for fixed 23, 24 degrees, we said, why don't we design it for slightly warmer temperature? And that way we get the energy benefit. Every degree increase leads to 5 to 6% energy savings in our buildings. So we are actually going to see significant energy benefit by increasing our temperature in our set point temperature in our building. So first we did on the left hand side, what you see is we did the analysis saying that in different location in the building, when we will feel cold, very cold, warm or very warm, and what is the temperature at which people will feel comfortable and how many hours of the year when you need to actually operate it in different ways. So you do the climate analysis, you understand what the comfort conditions are, and then you also look at what is my surroundings. So in places like LTG engineering, where you have a good amount of trees, you can actually take the benefit of that and reduce the heat gain that is falling on your buildings, thus reducing your energy consumption. So it's very, very important that you start looking at what is your surroundings. And based on that, we used a tool which is called something like shading mask, where we start designing when do we need to block the sun for our building, um, so that we get the maximum reduction in the heat gain of your building. So ultimately, we are trying to minimize the heat gain, so our AC has to work less, and so we save energy, right? So when we increase the temperature inside, again my heat gain reduces. And if I have a shading devices, again what happens is the solar radiation does not directly come inside, but it is getting blocked. Again, the orientation of shading is very important. If you are doing shading on the northern side, then it's least effective, because in northern side in our hemisphere, we rarely get a sunlight. Sorry, rarely get a direct solar radiation, right? So you can actually put more windows on the northern direction, as long as there is no glare inside. On east and west side, we get lower sun angles, right? Because sun is rising or setting. So you actually you need you may not have a fixed overhangs, that may not work, but you need a movable shading devices to block that solar radiation. But on the southern side, it's a very effective in our hemisphere, because in southern side, what happens is that the sun angle is very high, and when the sun angle is very high, you can actually put a overhang to block the solar radiation falling on the surface. So I hope that you can understand that shading is one of the oldest, but one of the very, very effective strategy that has been used in India and all over the world. The next strategy that we have used is a clerestory that we can use. So there is a limit to what the uh, how how you can use daylight. You know, there is a parameter to which we can use daylight. So how do we reduce energy consumption after reducing the heat gain? We reduce the lighting use of our space. And what reduces the lighting? By increasing the natural daylight coming inside the space. If you have good natural daylight, you will not use the artificial light, right? It's always more comfortable to use the natural or daylight in our building. It also makes our building more pleasant. So in our design, we looked at something called light shelf. How do we increase the penetration of our light shelf, of lighting inside, daylighting inside our building? So we assessed several options. There is no light shelf. What if there is a light shelf? And 500 light shelf or a 800 light shelf? And that light shelf essentially reflects the daylight, so the deeper part of our buildings also get daylight in our buildings. And what should be the angle to which we should cut it off? And on the right side, what you see here is the time of the day and the month of the year in which this strategy is effective from the shading, and what is the daylight values that we are getting inside the building. So you can see that between these three options, option one gives a good amount of daylight. You see a lot of yellow part here, right? Which is showing that, you know, there is a less shading because of the light shelf. You know, we are getting a lot more solar radiation inside the building. In the second, you can see that there is a lot of blue cells. So we get good daylight, but we don't get a lot of solar radiation. And if we increase the length of the light shelf, it's actually not going to benefit further, because you can see it can only reduce very, very little amount of direct solar radiation falling. So that's why we went with the 500 light shelf design in our building. Before I move further, I wanted to just take a pause here. It's been half an hour. So I wanted to understand if you have any questions so far, or if you'd like to discuss any specific point, we can talk about that and then move further. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. If you don't, then either I've explained it too well, or more likely I'm explaining something that is uh, not at all clear to all of you.
நீங்க நினைச்சிருந்தீங்க, நீங்க மனசு வச்சிருந்தீங்கன்னா டீம் தெரிஞ்சுக்கங்க, இல்லை நீங்க இதை விட தாங்கி பிடிச்சிருக்கீங்க, இன்னும் பெட்டரா சப்போர்ட்.
Okay, so I see no raised hand right now. Great. Okay, moving further then on the presentation. Okay, so once we determine what should be the thermal comfort, what should be the shading strategy in our building, and this is applicable to all the buildings, and you can think of your home when you talk about and think about the building design. The next part for us to see is that how do we make sure that we do not operate air conditioning systems throughout the year. So historically, as you know, we used to have either jolly in our spaces, or we used to actually manually go and open the windows when outside is comfortable. Now it becomes more and more difficult, especially in commercial building. So you need some way of automated way to actually open the windows when outside is comfortable and operate the AC. So when outside is warm and really temperature is high, you don't feel uncomfortable. So morning, afternoon, and evening is how we have analyzed this. So what we did is a computational fluid dynamics analysis, CFD. You may be very familiar with the CFD tool. We analyzed it for 12 months or 12 conditions, for one for each month, and morning, afternoon, and evening. So 36 total conditions. And we understood that how do we operate our building to minimize energy, but also maintaining the thermal comfort inside the building. So you can see that based on the CFD, this was our conclusion. We said that, in the morning of the January, windows should be closed because the outside conditions are very, very cold. So even if it can actually make people uncomfortable because you are actually keeping the temperature very low. But in the afternoon, when you have a little bit of sun, in the evening, you can keep the windows open and make people comfortable rather than actually operating air conditioning systems. Same thing with the February. In the March, when you go, the temperatures are slightly warmer. So you can open the windows during the morning, but afternoon and evenings are too warm for people to feel comfortable. So you need to, at that time, start operating the air conditioning system. And then you have to keep operating it from April to August onwards. And keep in mind that this is a daytime building. So this may work better in your homes when in the nighttime usage is more. But for the daytime, temperatures are a little warmer. So we'll have to keep running these systems, especially because the research equipment also generate a lot of heat. So what the CFD simulation also helped us was to understand that how the temperature distribution is throughout the space. So we are not only need to understand that how the conditions are, but also where people are sitting, are they feeling going to get the comfortable temperature or not. And the window design and opening design plays a very, very important role in ensuring that the right places is where you have a comfortable temperature. So this is where CFD simulation was very helpful in our building design. This may not be possible in small buildings or small places, but in commercial grade buildings, CFD simulation provides a lot of insights into how the buildings could be designed better. In the next phase of the design of a net zero energy building, we looked at saying that, okay, now we have done all the passive measures that we have thought about. What should be our goal of energy consumption? So we always need to have a benchmark, right? So the benchmark for us, we need to derive from our adjacent buildings in our campuses. And we said that the typical building, the way it's designed in our campus, if they use AC and a research equipment, it would consume 237 kilowatt hours per meter square per year. And this is a matrix that's typically used in the energy consumption to compare the energy consumption of different buildings, because the larger building will take more energy and the smaller will take less energy. To neutralize, you would actually divide it by a area meter square and then see what is the annual energy consumption that you are using for that building. So our benchmark was 238 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. And then we said if we put all the things that we know about the efficiency of the cooling systems, the fan, the lights, and the best equipment, research equipment, we can reduce that is our 58 kilowatt hour per meter square per year, or 58 EPI, energy performance index. So that was our target. So that's called the technical potential that we wanted to achieve from 237 to 58 kilowatt hour per meter square per year. We then used also a tool called Building Information Modeling, BIM, which helped us avoid the complications that we get on site. You know, often when we go on site, and I'm sure you have experienced that in our home as well, is that the plumbing line and the electrical line are conflicting with each other. So you will have to change the path, and when you change the path, the efficiency of the system gets affected. So we wanted to kind of do a prior design of each system and their layout, so there is no conflict when something goes on site. That's why the building information modeling tool has been used in this particular project. Let me talk about some of the construction used in our specific building. So what you see here is two bricks and a sandwich XPS insulation and a cement plaster on the inside. So this is a typical wall construction which is there in our net zero energy building. The 50 mm XPS is the insulation that gives us the resistance to heat. So what that does is it reduces the heat gain from the outside, and the matrix of that is shown on the top, which is called a U value. U value is how much watt you are getting per meter square of area, wall area, per degree of temperature difference. That's why 1 degree temperature difference, you are getting 0.42 watts, then it becomes per meter square, then you say 0.42 U value, watt per meter square. So lower the U value, lesser heat gains you have, and the more benefit you have. So that's the focus of the matrix that we use. So why is insulation used? It's to reduce the heat gain coming from the outside. So this is where we used insulation of 50 mm to reduce that heat gain. Thus, so if you reduce the heat gain, you reduce the size of your AC system and you reduce the operation of AC systems. And then you use the wall basement. Okay. The similar designs you can see from the basement walls, and in the basement wall you can see is a very high U value, because in the basement you are actually connected to earth, and the earth temperature does not vary significantly, so you don't have to have a very high insulation. And then the 3.3 actually is not a wall, it's actually a roof insulation, and the roof insulation is 0.28. It's a very high insulation that we have used. Again, roof gets the maximum solar radiation, so you want to minimize the heat gain. Yes, anyone has any questions? Or okay, so if you don't have questions, I request you to mute yourself. And then on the 3.4 is where you see the construction of the wall window, and in the window this is the design where you want to reduce again the U value, but also for window there is another matrix which is called solar coefficient, solar heat gain coefficient. The lower the solar heat gain coefficient, it's a matrix that will tell you that how much heat passes through the window. So if 100 watts is falling on the window, how much of that is passing through? That shows the fraction. So the solar heat gain fraction we have used is 29%. Only 29% falls inside. But the visible light, more visible light comes inside, because you want to reduce the solar heat gain, but you want to increase the visible light transmittance. And again, the U value is because it's a Low-E window, double coating. So there are two layers of glass and a gas in between. You get a good insulation even in the window. So that's the construction material that we have used. This is the roof construction that I mentioned in the beginning. So there is again U value and R value, and you can see all the details of the construction used in this building. So here is the layout of this building. This is now just to give you an information. You can see there is a longitudinal section where on the basement is where we have the conference rooms, and then the first ground floor is an open area so people can walk and we can do certain events there. First floor is where we have all the research equipment, and the mezzanine floor or the second floor here is where people are sitting. And this is an interesting design for several reasons. One is that the basement have been kept really closed to any outdoor air so that we mimic an office kind of situation. So there is no fresh air, when or no windows opening possible, but everything comes through the AC. On the first and second floor, the window opening is allowed and actually encouraged by us. So that's the design, and I think the design of your building will be very unique. One other strategy that we have used in this building is called a mixed mode building. So whenever, if you see when the outside is comfortable, you can see we utilize the outside air as much as possible to keep people comfortable. And when it gets hot, we closed everything and then we operate the air conditioning system to maintain the temperature inside the building. Now let me show you a little bit of research that we did as part of this study. So on the y-axis, what you see is a comfortable hour. So how many hours the person is comfortable. So here 100% gives the full comfort. So this is what your target would be, right? And the EPI, Energy Performance Index, you want to, the higher the EPI, more energy you are consuming, right? So you want to be in the lowest region. So your ideal cooling systems falls right here, that you want less EPI, but you want highest comfort of the occupants. This is where our traditional systems are, that they give a high comfort to everybody, right? But you consume a lot of energy. So this is where I think we've wanted to go. We want to go a high comfort and medium energy, or a medium comfort and low energy, because this is where we see the potential of using an alternate cooling systems in our building. So here we are, for example, using a radiant cooling system for our building in conjunction with the traditional VRV systems. This is where the traditional low energy cooling systems are, where they have low energy consumption, but they provide low comfort when you talk about throughout the year, right? So this is important in selecting the right kind of air conditioning systems in your building. So what is the highest energy consuming end use in our building? It's typically either it's actually the air conditioning systems, because air conditioning systems typically takes 50% of more energy of your building. Okay. Let me again pause here for a minute. If anybody has any questions so far, I can answer that, or I can continue with my presentation. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. If you don't, then let's move ahead with the presentation. Okay, I see no raised hand, so let's go ahead with the presentation. So after evaluating for different set points, this was done for 24 degrees, but we did for 27, 28 to understand what should be the let me just see here. I see some sound. Okay. All right. So we chose to go with high comfort and medium energy system, which is a radiant cooling system. And this is what we installed in our building. Is what you see on the left side is a typical radiant panel. So what is a radiant panel? It has a water pipe inside your in a panel sandwiched, so you can pass the cold water inside that panel and achieve comfort. So we actually make the whole all the envelope or the surfaces colder, and that makes the heat gain loss easier for the occupants and makes them feel a little bit more comfortable. This was supplemented by a VRF unit and the indoor units, and I'm sure you are familiar with the floor standing or the high wall type VRF units that's now commonly used with the outdoor unit that is there. So that's the HVAC system we used in this building. For the basement, we actually went with, like I said, with a sophisticated system. We went with the dedicated outdoor air system. What does dedicated outdoor air system do? It provides fresh air. So because this has a conference rooms in the basement, we need to get more air from the outside. You need to bring fresh air inside your building, right? To maintain the indoor air quality. So the DOAS or a dedicated outdoor air systems helps you get that fresh air inside your building. But then we put the heat recovery wheels or certain systems to recover that heat that you are losing from the space. So that's why you want to have a more efficient system, and you want to only get fresh air what is needed in the space based on the occupancy level. So that is what was installed in this particular building, and you can assess that. How do we assess the performance of a typical air conditioning system? There is a matrix called coefficient of performance. What that means, coefficient of performance, is what input delivered by the system in the cooling versus the watt of energy consumption, electrical energy consumption that it takes. So certain wattage it takes as an input, and it produces cooling because of the refrigeration system, depending upon the type of refrigeration system. So COP is a one matrix, and in a different unit, when you convert it, you can also put it in what is called the energy efficiency ratio or EER. So these are the common metrics used to assess the performance of air conditioning systems. And then I just wanted to give you a quick table to show you that what is the typical COPs that is recommended for different sizes of chillers in buildings. So you can see that COP, when you have a low capacity, then you can have 2.9 COP. I'll talk about the second table, which is IPLV, integrated part load performance, right, value. And you can see that the higher the capacity, you can actually increase the COP of your system. So there is a higher threshold, or a better, more challenging COP value that you have to meet. You can also see that air-cooled chillers are less efficient than the water-cooled chiller. Water-cooled chillers have better COPs, but they are typically available for high turns. Nowadays, though, you can get a lot more water-cooled chiller at low capacity as well, but it requires a different, maintenance team and operations. So sometimes air-cooled chillers are easier to install, but water-cooled chiller gives you a lot more energy savings. So that's a COP value. Just keep in mind the COP value for your air conditioning system whenever you buy in the market. And ER is another matrix used for us. I talked about the IPLV values as well. So COP values are given at a rated condition, but more, 90% of the time your AC will not be operating at the highest capacity, right? So your 1.5 ton AC may be operating at lower tonnage because that's what the need of the space is, or that's what the outdoor conditions are. So to better know that how the systems are performing at part load performance, there is a matrix derived which talks about integrated part load performance, IPLV, which is calculated, at 100% is a ratio of what the unit is expected to operate. So if your unit is expected to operate about 42% of the time at 75% capacity, and at 45% of the time at 50% capacity. So you can see only 1% of the time you are running at a 100% capacity. And 12% of the time you will be operating at 1/4 the capacity. So that's why this matrix is derived to give you an indication that you can put all of this together and get a value that is more realistic of what you will see in the real world, right? And you can see that these values are even higher than COP values. So it shows that your part load performance of these units are expected to be better at certain capacities. So you should not only check the COP of a unit, but you should also check at the IPLV or the part load performance of the unit when selecting your air conditioning systems. This is very important for the net zero energy design. Here are a few of the pictures of the building, and you are all welcome to schedule and come and visit our building. We would welcome you to come and visit our building to see a net zero energy building. Right now, we don't have a campus access because of the COVID situation, but once the the situation normalizes, you can write an email to us and come and visit the building. So this is the outdoor, and you can see in the yellow is the chiller. On the right side, you will see some of the images of the windows, and you can see how we have put the overhang, so you can kind of block the solar radiation falling on the surface of the windows. This is on the left side, the image shows the floor where we keep all the research equipment for our work. And on the right side is where you see where our all researchers are sitting. And you can see how much amount of daylight we are getting in the space to minimize the lighting energy consumption. Here is the photovoltaic panels that we have installed in our building to compensate for the energy consumption. So I'm going to stop here again, and before I go to the final session of my presentation, I would want to check if anybody has a question on the design of the net zero energy building before I talk about the monitoring system. Please raise your hand if you have any questions. Okay, I see some 2 raised hands. That's great. The first question of the session. Okay, so Mr. Chintaman Kadbhane, may I request you to please ask your question. I hope these attendees can unmute themselves, right? Please unmute yourself and ask the question. Or I don't know if
Sir,
I have to. Yes.
Sir, can I ask? Hitesh Bhargav here.
Yes, please.
Yes. Sir, here we are talking about this net zero building. Why you are not using that solar-based refrigeration or air conditioning system? Here, when we talk about this, all are VCR, vapor compression,
Right.
and electrical based. What is the main reason?
That's an excellent question. So there are several solar-based technologies, I would say, for providing cooling. Right now, what we wanted to do in this particular building is to use the technologies that can be used and replicated by other people very quickly. Now, when we talk about vapor absorption systems, or adsorption systems, for example, you actually need a much larger capacity, and certain also the COP of these technologies are very low at times. And so what we did when we assessed the system options, we actually compared their performances. But what we found is that the For a smaller systems, you know, our tonnage is only 10 or 12 tons for this building, right? Because we actually heavily insulated the building. For a smaller tonnage system, it actually does not.
1.6 છે કદાચ. પણ એ તો બદલવાનું નથી, જે આવે છે એ જ રાખવાનું છે.
Smaller systems, the market actually does not favor the solar absorption, the solar based refrigeration systems right now. But we have, since the last 2-3 years, there are some alternative technologies that have been coming in the market, which provides a hybrid solution of the VCR and the solar based solution for a combined approaches, where you can partially use the solar cooling while other partially you can use the vapor compression refrigeration system. And we have been in the talk with them to see how we can utilize it. But right now we only have a vapor compression system, mainly because of the size limitation. It makes a lot of sense when you are talking about industrial size, you know, cooling systems, when you talk about the solar refrigeration system. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, sir. And sir, another question. When we talk about this all arrangement, it all add a cost also. So we need to perform this economical analysis also.
Absolutely, that's another very good question. So what we have found is that it depends on how you look at cost, right? So there is a cost of doing the analysis. There is a cost of adding a material of the construction, right? Because you are adding insulation material, you are adding better windows, you are adding more different materials which are more resistant to heat. The cost of that is there, but there is also cost of reducing the size of air conditioning systems, right? So when you are heavily insulating the building, the system that used 100 ton or needed 100 ton, for example, would actually go down to 70-80 tons. So there is a cost saving also eating the installation time, right? And then you compare it with the every year how much energy we are saving. So what our research has shown is that roughly you are talking about 5% additional cost for building a highly efficient building. I'm not going to say generalize it, because you know it varies from building to building and the design to design, but 5% is a number that we have more or less heard from the consultants, and it pays back in 2 to 3 years. So that's why it makes a lot of sense for us to actually start going in the highly efficient domain. Even if it doesn't go into the net zero level, highly energy efficient building actually makes a very good business sense right now. Okay. Now, can I ask, there are 2 more raised hands other than Mr. Bhargav. Is one from Mr. Varyava.
Sir, Mr. Chintaman has asked in the chat box,
Okay.
can we plan the strategy or planning of opening of windows as per the change in the season? He means as per requirement of the light and thermal comfort in different location of the country.
Yes. So maybe I can read that question, because that's a little bit complex question, to see if I understand that. Can you read that question again? I'm not able to see the chat right now.
Can we plan the strategy or planning of opening of windows as per the change in the season? I mean, as per the requirement of light and thermal comfort in different location of the country.
So you can easily do it in different location of the country. So when you do the climate analysis, you know what is the climate is, what is where the location is. So if it's in Delhi, you know what will be the temperature, what will be the direction of wind, and you can design it so that you maximize it in certain seasons. But once you design the opening, typically, you know how our windows are fixed, right? So you can design it, but then you need to have some openable mechanism. So there is a device that's called damper. So you can actually close the windows in certain period, and then you open it. So you can design it for the season, but you can't keep changing it. So typically in the way buildings are designed is once you start designing it, you fix the opening. While designing, you think through a lot, saying that what happens in season, winter, monsoon, summer, how we can maximize it. But once you start and size it, you place it in certain locations, and that's fixed for the life of the building, right? So that's why I'm not understanding the question about changing it per season. You design it for all the seasons, you analyze it, and then you pick the best location. But you can definitely do it for different climatic location. That's a very, very doable and widely used strategy. Thank you, Darshit, for helping with that question. I see two more raised hands. You can either unmute yourself or Mr. Darshit Shah can help you.
Hello, sir.
Okay.
So,
May I ask the question, sir?
yes, I think Mr. Varghese, we can start with you, and then we can
Sir,
go to.
you use two words, PV and hybrid. So there is one more technology, name as an photovoltaic thermal system. So how much future this system has in your this net zero system that you are talking about? Whether it has any application or
Can you elaborate on the photovoltaic thermal system, because there are different photovoltaic thermal systems as well. So I can.
Yes, sir. So basically, I'm working on flat plate photovoltaic thermal system.
Right.
So,
I
is there?
think it has a good potential for sure. I think that's been why now. So photovoltaic itself has inherent limitations. Since you are working in that domain, you know that as well as I do in terms of the how much it can absorb, and converting into thermal is easiest because when you do that, you are actually trying to remove certain losses that happens. So when in a normal world, what happens when we convert PV into electricity, if I put it in simpler word, and then when you need thermal energy, we then use again the electricity to convert into a thermal, right? And so there are losses when there is a transfer, energy transfer occurs. And so if you can use it directly, there is definitely a benefit, and it's also helps in the offset in terms of when to use it. You store it and you utilize it. So PV flat plate is definitely a useful strategy, and I think a lot of people have been looking at it. But I'll be honest is that I think it's far from actually realizing its potential. Unless there is a breakthrough, I see that in the real world, it will take some years for it to get into the market and actually become a mainstream technology. I hope that answers your question, Mr. Variano. Okay, whoever feels that their question is answered, you can put your hand down so that I can know whom to ask further. So there is a Professor Dr. Kalpesh Vandra,
Yes.
if you can ask
Yes,
the
yes.
question.
Sir, my question is that normally when the space is the constraint for the any building, and normally we think that in the India the people are living. I'm talking about the home where we can able to implement this zero energy kind of things with the lower space, and how it is useful for the owner of those houses, because majorities are living in that much small homes. I can say that.
Right. So you are saying, how do we take a net zero concept to affordable housing
Yes.
sector, right?
Yes.
I think it's a very, very good question. I think it's a very pertinent in India. But you would see, Professor Vandra, that you will see that the technology that I have mentioned in this I have not mentioned any rocket science technology.
Yes.
So I have only mentioned which is available so that people. So what's the cost of insulation? The cost of insulation is not as high. I wouldn't put numbers because we don't want to do that here in this forum, but they are not high compared to other materials that you are seeing, and the benefit is for 20 years, and so it's definitely falls under the affordable housing. Uh, if you use the prefabricated homes, you see
Okay.
that even the
Yeah.
metal homes, they even sandwich the insulation panels in there,
Yes.
right? So it's not a technology that's new or costly. It's a technology that can be easily put, as long as we have, where the barrier is the installers are the barrier. We don't find enough people who can properly install the insulation systems in the market. That's the barrier, which is what many domain has a technician barrier in our world right now.
Yes.
So it's very much doable. We all use evaporative coolers, right, in our home. Even it's used in many parts. By enhancing evaporative coolers, and Dr. Bhatt can vouch on this because he has been working a lot in this domain as well. Is that's a domain where we can actually go into the affordable cooling system, the solar-based solutions. So there is a lot of potential, I believe, that we, and especially why I'm excited to present to this group is because I think this group has the potential to actually convert this into a research and do something exactly what you
Yes.
are telling.
Sir, I
Convert.
read that normally nowadays, after 3 years of government's initiative of solar, then now people, common men can understand what the benefit they are going to get by the use of solar. The same way we
Right.
expect that this concept also need to aware in a very good way into the people, common men, I can say that. So they can, while they are building their home, they can take care this kind of points and they can make it zero energy kind of a design for their homes.
Exactly. So affordable cooling, if we do one design and we analyze it and decide the locations of window openings, we don't have to do it again and again. The cost is not there. Once you do it, let's say CPW does it for one part and then use it throughout for everything, right? The technologies are there. The split AC, again there is an advanced split AC is also coming. So that's again there, all evaporative coolers. So I think it makes more sense for affordable sectors to be net zero than our standard sectors, where because it would. So that's my answer to that question.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, so I have 19 minutes. So what I request is give me 10 minutes to go through the rest of the presentation. And then we can go back to the discussion. If you have any questions, we can everyone, we can go back. I'll be happy to answer all the questions, but I have to be respectful to the other speakers who are going to be there at 3 p.m. Right? So what I wanted to explain is that designing is one part of it, but you need to actually monitor the performance of your building as well, because it's not a one-time effort. Net zero is not a one-time effort. You design it, but you need to continuously track it and improvise, because there will be losses that you didn't plan on. So you need to keep measuring it. And this is where many places in India who design net zero energy building do not continuously track. So I have seen buildings after 5 years that they are not net zero anymore. So we need to be aware of it. So for this particular building, since we are researchers and all of you are faculty members, we divide it into two. Um, uh, okay. I request all the participants to mute yourself. So we divide it into building information system, which is where we keep track of the comfort, humidity, air velocity. So we get the information of what is happening in the building. How is the occupancy, what the outdoor conditions are, what's the usage, and then we manage. So that's how we have divided the strategy. And I think that's the strategy which all net zero energy buildings should have. I'm going to go through these 10-15 slides very fast because the message of this is simple, right, of these slides. There is no science. I'm just demonstrating that this is how one can check that there is a net zero energy building built. And all this information that I'm sharing is in the public domain on our website, and it's in a report form, so you can dig into it. You don't have to remember everything what I'm saying in this presentation. So there is we have monitoring, we have integrated with the HVAC systems. So what happens often is that AC is operating on its own without knowing what building is doing, right? And so what you would like is that the whole building works as one integrated system to optimize the system performance, including the PV, right, photovoltaics. So then you would know when to use, photovoltaic energy, when to give it to the grid, or you can use a thermal storage or plate collectors, as mentioned, where you can actually effectively utilize it for the building purposes, maybe for hot water heating as well. And then the controls, this is important because we don't need to only monitor but control, and then sharing the information with the occupants is equally important in the building. So here are few slides of how our monitoring system is. This is the main screen where we monitor, what's happening on each floor, what each system is doing, and what each components are. And again, like I said, if you come again to our lab, we'll be happy to demonstrate this building to you and help you gain additional knowledge. And because we are researchers, data is our core focus. So we are monitoring many detailed points, so we know the performance of each system in our building, in our monitoring strategy. Here are a couple of pictures of the how our monitoring systems look like. On the left side, you will see certain panels where we have lights and displays for facility team to kind of review it. And the right side is what you see is the screen and computer where the software displays the data. And there is this whole box which talks or shows all the wires and controllers, which is where all the data is coming from. Now, let me just take 5 more minutes to kind of walk you through the actual data. So here I wanted to actually share what we have monitored in that particular building, our building. So this is on outdoor temperature and the humidity range that you are seeing, as well as wind speed. So you can see that we have observed temperature as high as 47, 48 degrees for this building. And 43 degrees, which is a blue bar. The humidity as high as 100%, when it's raining, and it happens in July, August, September, as you can see. And the wind velocity, which is as high as 2.5 meter per second, which is a very reasonable speed that you observe in around Ahmedabad. So it has gone through a wide set of conditions. And in this graph, we wanted to show a typical performance that we see in our building. So the gray bar is what we see is the outdoor surface temperature of a roof. And you can see that roof can go as high as 60-degree temperature outdoor because of the solar radiation falling on it. But then you look the roof interior, it's actually maintaining very consistent temperature because of 2 reasons. One is because of the AC, but also you will see during the weekend. So you can see from the curve of this graph that one is the weekend and weekdays. The first 2 days are weekends. Also the temperature is low, showing that the insulation that we have used to reduce the heat gain is quite effective in the building. So this is how you can assess that all the strategy that we have designed for, is it working or not. Similar with that, on the same week, what was the energy consumption? So you can see what was the PV generation for that particular day, for this particular week, how was AC using the energy for every hour, what was the lighting energy consumption, and what was the plug load consumption. You can also see the outdoor temperatures, which was there during that time. So you can correlate how it increases with the outdoor temperature for a typical summer week. And this is the same graph for a typical winter week. And you can, as you can expect, the HVAC energy significantly reduces during the winter. This is still there because we have certain research equipment that we have to run throughout the year. And the electricity consumption patterns are also different, right? Here you can see that there are different energy consumption here. This is the same analysis, but in a yearly, what we can talk about is a heat map format. So you can see that the red shows the highest energy consumption, and you can quickly analyze that during the June, when it was little hotter and more humid, that's when the maximum energy consumption occurred. And then you can see also in the monsoon period between August and October, you'll see some yellow bars, which is still showing a high energy consumption. And the lowest energy consumption happened in the beginning of January period, which is where you will have a least amount of need for air conditioning systems. So this is just quickly gives you a summary of if something unexpected is happening. Let's say my energy consumption was very high in February or March, then I would start analyzing it, right? Seeing that what's happening, why is it taking energy? Am I leaving something on or off, or something is not working as expected? This is a graph on the monthly energy consumption and generation. So you will see that during a June period, my energy consumption was higher than what the generation is, which is on the red. But in the March, the energy consumption was lower than what is generation. That's why it's a net zero energy building. And Mr. Vasyava would also understand that the efficiency of the PV is highest during the March period, right? When the outdoor temperatures are more favorable, because at the ambient temperature, even though the solar radiation is higher in May period or May or June, because of the higher ambient temperature, my efficiency of the PV panel reduces, right? And so this is why the energy consumption is highest in the June period, and energy generation is highest during the March period. And this is, an annual energy consumption by end use. So research equipment took about 16 kilowatt hour per meter square. The AC took about 24 kilowatt hour per meter square. And this includes, AC to offset the heat generated by research equipment and for occupant comfort. So it's a combined effect here. You see the lighting energy consumption is very, very low, which shows that the daylighting strategy worked very good for this building. And the plug load is where, what researchers are using for their laptops and printing and all that. So that's 2.7 kilowatt hour per meter square. And this sort of kind of closes the loop. As I had started with our design goal, what is our actual consumption? So we started with 58, but we achieved 42.5. We generated 51.2. And so this building is 8.6 kilowatt hour per meter square. So this is where, I said, okay, this was my goal. This is the actual consumption, and this is what my generation is. So this is where you can kind of understand that whether I have completed the loop. And there is one another parameter to look at is comfort, right? Because I can keep ACs off and keep people uncomfortable and say that this is a net zero energy building, right? So we actually take regular comfort surveys to understand how occupants are feeling inside. So we ask them to know that, do you feel it's comfortable? Do you feel we need to raise temperature, reduce temperature, and continuously track what's the comfort inside the building. And you can see here that the green, many people are saying that's a green, saying that it's a comfortable and very comfortable environment. The blank row shows that, the certain researchers are traveling or they are not, on their desk at the time of the survey. So that's the missing data. But there are also people who say that they are just uncomfortable. So you will always have certain people, so you know that this is a realistic survey. And this is where we compared the band that I talked at the beginning of the presentation, that this is, what my temperature conditions are, and these are the actual measured tribal temperature, and it's right close to the 90% band of when, or the temperature we could maintain. So that showed that our, building could achieve the temperature that we were planning to achieve in our building. And at that temperature, we found that, many people said 90 to 95% people said that they are comfortable, even at the higher temperature. So once you actually reduce the, wall temperature, window temperature, you can maintain a slightly warmer temperature. This was validated, I would say, by, the survey results that we are getting with the measurement data. So that's all I have for the presentation. I have 5 more minutes. I'd be happy to answer any questions that all of you have. Please raise your hand if you have any more questions.
Participant can ask the questions if you have.
Okay, hearing none. I hand it over back to Mr. Darshit Shah and organizers to take it forward from here.
So on behalf of entire team and the participants, I'm very much thankful to Shukla sir for such an informative session. We are very much enriched by the knowledge in this area. So thank you very much, sir.
Welcome. Like I said at the beginning, it's a pleasure to be part of this group, and I'm welcome all of you to come and visit us whenever COVID situation regularizes. I also want to thank Dr. Bhatt because he has taught me, so it's been honored to be invited by him. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So should I stop sharing the presentation?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, sir.
Okay, great. And leave the meeting. Please guide me further on what I need to do.
Yes, sir. You can leave the meeting. On the top right corner, you can see the leave button. You can leave the meetings.
Yes, great. Thank you very much. Thank you all. Bye-bye.